Just when it looked like we might go a full week without a cheap tournament on Underdog, they said, no, here's another puppy. We'll break down the contest structure as well as talk through some of the ambiguous situations that we can take advantage of during this tournament. You're watching another edition of Best Ball in 15 on The Climb. All right, here we go. Hopping in a puppy draft. Ended up in the 11th spot in this one. I can't seem to find my way into the first half drafts very often. So starting off with the structure here, week 15 is 1 of 12, week 16 is 1 of 10, and then in the finals is over 300 teams. So a little bit softer of an advancement structure than Best Ball Mania, but pretty similar in the finals in terms of how we want to be correlating our lineups for week 17. So I start off this draft with CeeDee Lamb, come back around the turn, and I could do the chalk stack of CeeDee and Amon-Ra for week 17, and I was kind of grappling with that. I just hate starting off with a very obvious stack like that, so I went Garrett Wilson. One difference with the puppy this year, they're doing 100K in regular season prizes. However, those prizes are only going to 0.05% of lineups. 10K of that is going to the first place team in the regular season. So it's not really something that I think we can strategically plan for, but it's just a nice little bonus to have in the contest. So one thing I noticed right off the bat with this draft is it was pretty wide receiver heavy. You got T. Higgins going at pick 20, DK going in the second round, DeAndre Hopkins, who I'll talk through a little bit more here in a second, going at the 2-3 turn, and then Christian Watson going in the mid-third. So already had my radar up that we're going to need to stay ahead on the wide receivers here. By the time my pick came around here, I was hoping that I would have a chance to get the Mark Andrews Lamar stack at the 3-4 turn. I've yet to be so lucky there. So I took Calvin Ridley. Basically had 3 players that I was looking at when I came around the turn: Amari, Gibbs, or Lamar. Lamar and Gibbs came off the board, so I went with Amari. He correlates for week 17 with Garrett Wilson and also helps me stay ahead of the potential wide receiver avalanche that we saw building here in this draft. So I wanted to talk through the D-Hop stuff a little bit more. Obviously, with these cheaper contests like the puppy, they're only open for a week or two with the exception of the slow drafters. So I do think they're, when I go into this contest, I want to identify situations that I can try to take advantage of during this short time window. And the 2 that stand out right now are the D-Hop situation as well as the Vikings running back situation. And with D-Hop in particular, you can get pretty creative with how you're mixing him into your lineups, because there's so many different teams that he is rumored to be connected to right now. So here's an example of a draft I did earlier where I started off Kelsey, Mahomes, D-Hop, basically going all in on him signing with the Chiefs. I was hoping Ken Walker would fall to me here in the late 5th. That feels like a really nice value, but he didn't get there. Considered a tight end here, but with both Kittle and Pitts on the board, I felt confident one of them would get back around to me. So I pushed it. Kittle came off the board, and I took Pitts. Part of why I took J.K. Dobbins here is he plays Miami in week 17. Now, I didn't have any Dolphins on this lineup yet, but in week 16, Miami plays Dallas. I have CeeDee Lamb. In week 15, Miami plays the Jets, and I have Garrett Wilson. So now I'm set up to add what will likely be a Miami running back later in this draft and sprinkle in a little bit of playoff correlation across the board there. So continuing with the line of thinking on the D-Hop stuff, with that lineup where I put him on the potential Chiefs stack, I think that opens up later in the draft to guys like Nico Collins, or later in drafts, a Cedric Tillman on the Browns. Those are places D-Hop's been rumored to going. If you build a lineup where you're making a bet on D-Hop going to one team, you should be more confidently drafting the wide receivers from the teams where D-Hop doesn't end up in that scenario. So like a Nico Collins, the Browns receivers, guys who D-Hop could potentially mess up, but if you're betting on him going to the Chiefs, fully commit to that bet. So here I pushed Watson around the turn. I knew the guy at the turn had Lamar. So I ended up reaching a little bit for Bateman. That was kind of the last call on wide receiver for me before we hit the cliff, was wanting to get one of those Baltimore guys. And with the drafter at the turn having Lamar, I could have seen him taking both of them. So grab Bateman, grab Deshaun Watson to pair with Amari, and he's already game stacked with Garrett Wilson as well. Real quick here, I want to plug our upcoming schedule for the show. This Monday, my co-host EJ will have a full draft video up. Then the one we really wanted to plug on Wednesday night, we're going to be going live at 6:30 Central. It's going to be our first live show. We'll be hopping in, doing 2 different puppy drafts. Should be a lot of fun. So especially if you watch Ship Chasing on Wednesday nights, you can come hang out with us beforehand and then head over to Ship Chasing. So definitely check that out. Then on Thursday, we've got a best ball beginner, one of me and EJ's league mates who we've been playing fantasy football with for almost a decade will be joining us. He's brand new to best ball. We'll see if me and EJ can keep the train on the tracks while we draft with him. And then we'll be back next Saturday for another best ball in 15. EJ will be taking care of that one. So definitely give us a like and subscribe here on the channel. Also follow us on Twitter to stay up to date on all. So at this point, heading into the 9th round, only had one running back, was in good shape at wide receiver, had a quarterback and tight end where I felt comfortable just doing 2 at those positions. So this was definitely a point in the draft where I was looking at running backs. So some guys on the board that we considered here: Charbonnet, Brian Robinson, Devon Achane. Grabbed Charbonnet a little bit past ADP there. Not crazy value by any means, but he's a guy that I like at ADP, so certainly happy to get him there. We took Devon Achane, as I mentioned, the Miami correlation throughout the playoffs. So that put us at a team of Watson, J.K. Dobbins, Charbonnet, Achane, wide receiver CeeDee Lamb, Garrett Wilson, Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, Rashad Bateman, Kyle Pitts. One thing that's nice about some of these ambiguous backfields like a Miami or a Chicago is, when you are trying to sprinkle them in for a playoff stack or a team stack, you don't always have to take the first running back. Obviously, I could have taken a different running back here and tried to get Jeff Wilson or Raheem Mostert later, but it lined up as a position of need, and it was at ADP value, so I was perfectly fine taking him there. Coming around to this next pick here, kind of a gross spot. Considered Jonathan Mingo to set up a Bryce Young stack later. Kind of feeling a little barren at quarterback 2 as far as options, because I did pass on Aaron Rodgers. Mingo went off the board before me, so got Khalil Herbert at a little bit of a value. He correlates with Kyle Pitts. And then I grabbed Nico Collins. He's a wide receiver that I like. Talked about him before. And he gives me another backdoor stack option in CJ Stroud. So at this point, we had 1 quarterback, 4 running back, 6 wide receiver, and 1 tight end. And still planning on doing just 2 quarterback and 2 tight end in this build. Another ambiguous situation that you're probably running out of time to target in the puppy is the Viking running backs. You can see in this draft, Madison went early in the 7th round. His ADP right now, I think, is in the upper 70s or around 80. I've had some drafts where he still falls to 90, and that's an absolute smash. But I took quite a bit of Madison in the puppy 1 at cheaper costs. But there was yet another report yesterday that Dalvin Cook is probably on his way out the door. So feels like we've reached the last call on cheap Alexander Madison. So if you don't have Madison and you want him on your team before he's at a 4th, 5th round price tag, now's the time to get him. So I did grab DJ Chark here, again, trying to give myself outs for a second quarterback stack option, and then grabbed Sam Laporta to round out the tight end room and give myself a bring back with CeeDee Lamb, since I did pass on the chalky Amon-Ra stack at the beginning of this draft. So kind of started at this point in the draft to think through whether I wanted to go 5 or 6 running backs. And because of how heavy I went wide receiver early on, I was leaning towards doing 6 running backs, 8 wide receivers in this draft. Jerome Ford would have been a really nice pick to get. He goes off, and then Bryce Young goes off the board as well. So at this point, I was pretty committed to getting CJ Stroud with my next picks. Beyond that, you're kind of relegated to doing a backdoor Mac Jones stack or rolling the dice on someone like a Sam Howell, but there really aren't that many great Washington stack options at this point in the draft. So I take Chuba here, adding in, kind of building into the Carolina bet I have with DJ Chark, even though I didn't get Bryce Young. And then I push Stroud around the turn. The guy at the turn already had 2 quarterbacks, so I felt comfortable that Stroud would make it around, and he does. So now we've got Stroud. So we're done at quarterback, done at tight end, and then at this point, just looking to add another running back and wide receiver. It was absolutely crushing to miss out on Tyjae Spears here. He went off 1 pick before me. Would have fit perfectly, given me 2 weeks worth of correlation with the Houston stack, and there's really not any Titans options left late in this draft that I like to add in. So that one really, really hurt. And I ended up going with an unstacked Week 17 Houston team as a result, because I just didn't want to force a really crappy Titans player into my lineup solely for the sake of correlation. So I knew I wanted Cedric Tillman here as my last wide receiver, and then had several options for where I could go with my last running back. The guys over at Establish the Run are really, really high on Ty Chandler, and that situation for who's going to be the RB2 is still a little bit ambiguous to me, whether it's going to be Ty Chandler or Dwayne McBride. But, since it does feel like we're getting closer and closer until Dalvin Cook is off the Vikings, I'm happy to start tacking on Ty Chandler now, because I think he'll shoot up quite a bit if Dalvin Cook is removed. Could have taken Malik Davis or an Israel Abanikanda, but Ty Chandler, I think, right now is the best bet for some closing line ADP value. So that wraps up this draft. We'll have a quick lineup review where I dive into some of the specifics that I'm looking for on roster construction. All right, so got the full lineup here, 2-6-8-2 build with Cleveland and Houston stacks. Obviously got the Jets bring back for the Cleveland stack, but did not get Tyjae Spears for the Tennessee bring back with Houston. That one hurt quite a bit. In terms of roster construction, I gave this lineup 5 stars, and I wanted to expand a little bit on why that was. So this is from TJ Hernandez, showing the roster constructions that have had an advance rate over expectation in the playoffs during all 3 of the previous Best Ball Manias. You can see 2-6-8-2 is on there. 2-5-8-3 is also a build that I use quite a bit. I'm all for pushing different, outside of the box structures, because, I think there is something to getting creative and unique with how you build your lineups. But in terms of sort of baseline roster construction, I think 2-6-8-2 is one of the best, and the data backs that up. In terms of wide receivers, Hayden Winks as well as Pat Kerrane have both kind of talked about various thresholds for having wide receivers through certain points in the draft, and it varies depending on who you look at. But I think given how expensive wide receivers are being pushed up this year, 5 through 9 is kind of a good rule of thumb for this year. So for me, the Rashad Bateman, Cortland Sutton is kind of the cutoff. I want to have 5 wide receivers by then. And obviously in this lineup, we did that. On the flip side, in terms of running back construction, Pat Kerrane talked about the playoff build last year in an article that he did while he was still at NBC Sports Edge. And it talks about all aspects of lineup construction in that article. But one thing he hit on was the importance of having 4 running backs by round 14. And that's something that I sometimes struggle with because I think I try to push my running back rooms a little bit too thin sometimes. But in this case, we did get 4 running backs by round 11. So felt really good about this build overall. Nothing to write home about in the ADP department on this one, so I won't linger too much here. Khalil Herbert, a little bit of a value. Nothing too egregious in terms of reaches. Rashad Bateman sticks out a little bit ahead of ADP, but it was a wide receiver heavy draft, so that didn't feel too bad. And then finally, with playoff stacks, stack the ever-living crap out of this lineup for the playoffs. So if we get there, there's tons of different little mini game stacks that could carry us through the playoff weeks. So obviously have to get there, but this lineup could be a lot of fun if it does get there. And this is even without missing out on the Tennessee bring back. One final thing I wanted to hit on with this and the D-Hop stuff. Obviously, I have Deshaun Watson and Amari Cooper. D-Hop is rumored as potentially landing in Cleveland. But in this case, I didn't get D-Hop in this draft because he was already gone before my 3rd round pick. So in that case, I'm going to lean into the world where D-Hop doesn't end up on Cleveland, which is why I felt comfortable taking Cedric Tillman, even though picking Cedric Tillman is probably bad if D-Hop ends up there. So just something I'm thinking through with the D-Hop stuff, kind of leaning into it or leaning away from it in these drafts, trying to be conscious of that. Finally, just want to give a plug. Make sure you're following us on Twitter as well as subscribed here on YouTube. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave it a like. It helps us grow the show. And, if you're following us, we are going to give away $25 when we hit 100 subscribers. So that's going to be it for this episode of Best Ball in 15. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you'll join us on Wednesday night for our live stream. Again, that's going to be at 6:30 Central Time. I'm Alex, and this has been another edition of Best Ball in 15 on the Climb.